Hi, I'm Dane County Executive Joe Parisi, and welcome to this month's Dane County Podcast. This is Mental Health Awareness Month, and today we are really thrilled to have some folks with us who are great partners in the community with Dane County. With us is Trish Grant. She works with Catholic Charities. She's the Building Bridges Program Director, and Building Bridges is the program we're going to be discussing as we get into today's podcast. And we also have Nura Capriglione, the service coordinator in the Monona Grove School District for the Building Bridges project. So Building Bridges is a program that we developed a little over a decade ago. We're celebrating the 10th anniversary. It's a program in which the county partners with local school districts and Catholic Charities to put mental health teams, embed them in school districts to provide services to young people and their families where they're at in the schools, in the communities. And this idea was really born out of conversations we had with folks in the community. I remember, so this is 10 years old, so it's probably about 11 years ago. I was in Verona meeting with some of our county social workers, some school social workers, law enforcement, community-based organizations, and just asking folks, what's on your radar screen now? What kind of challenges are you seeing? What kind of things are unaddressed that we could potentially help partner with you on? And over came the issue of mental health challenges and difficulty accessing services, and particularly in schools, for example, if someone had a mental health crisis, often the only folks to turn to were law enforcement. And law enforcement and the schools were telling us, that's not always the appropriate call. When someone's having a mental health crisis or mental health challenges, they need help and they need a mental health professional. And so we decided that we wanted to be part of a solution to help address this. We worked internally and with external partners and developed the Building Bridges program. We originally piloted it in 3 locations, Sun Prairie, Verona, and the city of Madison. And it was an immediate success. And it was so successful that other school districts started hearing about it and came knocking on our doors. This is a partnership because the county coordinates, lets the contract, help develop the program and coordinates it. Catholic Charities carries out the work in the school districts, and the funding is 50-50, with half of the dollars coming from Dane County and half coming from the participating school districts. And again, the reason we got involved was because school districts can't do it all on their own. It takes a village to raise a child, and we all need to be part of that solution. And Building Bridges has turned out to be quite an amazing solution to a lot of challenges folks are facing. I mentioned we started with a pilot of 3. We are now across the Dane County in virtually every school district. Dane County is investing nearly $2 million annually in this program, and we hear nothing but good things. The data shows that we're having successes. The conversations with parents and families and young people show that it's a very needed and effective program. So we wanted to talk to folks about it today, let you know it's out there, let you know what Dane County government, your school districts, and Catholic Charities is up to out in the community. So I'd like to start with you, Trish. Again, this is Trish Grant. She's the Building Bridges Program Director at Catholic Charities. And Trish, could you give us kind of just an overview from Catholic Charities' point of view of the program?
Absolutely. Thanks for having us. It's always great to get out in the world and share the good work of Building Bridges and have the chance to thank you, Executive Parisi, for the support and all the districts that we get to partnership through Catholic Charities to run this program. So thank you for the opportunity. Let me try to just give a little description of what Building Bridges is. So as you mentioned, we are in 10 Dane County public school districts. We have 13 teams of 2. Pretty much one team of 2 is assigned to every district, except in Madison, we have 4 teams of 2. Each team is assigned to feeder schools that feed elementary and middle feeder schools that feed into each of the main 4 Madison high schools. So that's 13 teams of 2. Every team is made up of a service coordinator and a clinical coordinator. Almost all of our staff are either mental health professionals or social workers, a lot of master level graduates. Those are the types of staff that we're looking to hire. Service coordinators, their main focus is to serve the parents of the student who is referred to Building Bridges. At the same time as their teammate, the clinical coordinator, they serve the school team of the referred student and then often is doing some individual work with the student as well. One of the many great things about Building Bridges is that the school districts themselves come up with the referrals. They are the referral source. So what that looks like is usually any student service staff, so a school social worker, a counselor, a psychologist, they will have a student on their radar who they can imagine could benefit from the work of Building Bridges. And so they kind of collaborate as a student services team to try to figure out who are the 12 students that we are going to refer to Building Bridges each semester, because that is how many students each team serves every semester. Once they have their list of 12, or they start to gather their list of 12, then the next most important step is to connect with the parent or guardian of the student that they're interested in referring. It is a voluntary program. Parents can say, absolutely, we're on board, or they may say, this doesn't feel like the right fit for our family. And so we appreciate parents given the opportunity to use their voice to say whether or not this is something that they would like for their child and for their family. Once we receive word from the school that a student has been referred to Building Bridges and their guardian gives consent, then our team of two really steps in and takes it from there. First step usually is they're going to have a meeting with the child's school team and really learn what's going on at school for this child, what's working well, what are the challenges, what have you tried, what's not going well. Most of the students that come our way, which by the way, we've served students in 4K through 8th grade. We just recently decided that we are going to expand permanently to include 9th graders. That was just recently decided. We just wrapped up a 2-year pilot with 9th graders. And based on how it's gone the past 2 years, we recently decided, based on feedback from Dane County Human Services and from our district partners, we are going to continue serving 9th graders. We will continue to prioritize elementary and middle, but we can serve 9th graders if it's a good fit, if that support as they transition to a new school, high school is needed, then we can serve those students. So anyway, the first step is usually an intake meeting with the school team to learn what's going on at school. Most of the students coming our way are what we would call externalizers, showing behavior that everybody can see and is very evident and obvious. However, we always encourage our referring school district staff to also pay attention to the internalizers, the students who may not be showing any big behaviors or demonstrating any of those types of challenges, but likely are struggling just in a different way. So step 1, the school intake meeting, learning about what's happening at school. Step 2 is meeting with the parent or guardian. And our staff will meet parents and guardians whenever and wherever is most comfortable and convenient to them. And they really our staff spend that time, first of all, making sure the parent understands exactly what they're signing up for, giving them another opportunity to provide their consent and understand all the ins and outs of the programs and what's going to happen over the next 90 days. And then giving them an opportunity to share same thing kind of as the school team. What's going on at home? What are the challenges? What's going well in your family? What do you want to see different for your child? What do you want to see different for your relationship with your child? What resources does your family need? For a lot of families, if step 1, let's focus on making sure their basic needs are met. After that's done, then maybe we can move into some of the kind of more intensive topics, such as their child's mental health, their own mental health, their parenting struggles, those types of things. So our staff will take the information they gather from the school meeting, from the parent meeting. Perhaps they may also do some classroom observations of the student. They're going to take all that pretty quickly after those intake meetings, and they're going to work with the parent to come up with 1 to 3 goals that the parent wants to work on during the 90-day program. It can be a goal focused on home stuff. It can be a goal focused on school. It can be a community goal, or it can be all 3. And then really once the parent or guardian agrees to that service plan and those goals, then really that is when all the intensive work begins. So the service coordinator starts doing their work with the family at home, and then the clinical coordinator starts doing their work with the school team. And like I said before, usually individual meetings with the student. Our staff are not providing traditional therapy. Many of our staff are therapists, but instead they're doing sometimes what we like to call therapy light, which means getting students ready for a long-term therapist that they may be connected with after our 90-day program ends. Or our staff will pick a very specific skill that they want to work on with the student during their individual meetings during the 90-day program. And always, no matter what, looping the school team into all of those things. Because our biggest philosophy in Building Bridges is capacity building. We are a short-term 90-day program. It's going to be very intense. It's going to be wraparound. Our staff are very focused on what skills, what tools, what resources, what information are we leaving behind with the parent, with the student, with the school team to just help them feel better equipped to deal with everything that's going on, to connect them with much longer term providers, building those solid connections to a therapist, to different social workers, different longer term programs than what we provide. So after 90 days, our staff bring everybody together at the table that they've worked with during the 90 days. So the school team, the parent and guardian, sometimes the student if it's age appropriate, to really review all the work that was done during the 90-day program and make sure everybody involved has all of those tools, resources, skills, information in their possession to take with them. Then our staff check in 1 month after closing to, again, kind of circle back to that closing plan. Is everybody taking all the pieces they committed to taking? And then doing another follow-up at the 6-month mark to, again, see how things are going. If things have fallen apart, how can they tighten back up again, shore things up again, and really just wish everybody well from there.
Yeah, thank you. That's so much. Nura, as I'm interested in a minute getting into some of the, what's it like, on the ground, on the daily basis. I'm sure it's different with every case and every day, but I can't help but think, and look back as a parent, that when I hear what Trish is describing, if you're a parent with a young person who's having challenges, this seems kind of like a godsend. I mean, is it universally, what kind of reception do you get from the families? Does that differ, or is it generally, thank goodness there's somewhere to turn?
I think, like you said, it depends. Like every family is different. Most of the families who end up participating are, yes, it feels like they've been waiting for something and they didn't know where to turn. I've heard from a lot of parents, this would have been great when I was a kid. Mm-hmm. They're struggling with the same kind of challenges I did. And often the families that sign on with us are ready for assistance in some way, mm-hmm. And looking for tools to get to those next steps, whatever that is. Like Trish was saying, whether that's basic needs from getting food and housing security, or some of the more refined, just like, are we working on emotion regulation and mm-hmm. communication, or are we just really trying to get them stable so that they can attend school and not have some just foundational struggles?
Yeah, I mean, what I've found interesting is I've met over the years with Building Bridges teams to hear about what you're dealing with and what you're seeing is, we probably all of us, when we hear about this, have maybe a preconceived idea of what this looks like and what a mental health challenge may be. But what I've learned talking with you and your coworkers is there is no one unique case, and the number of needs just is across the spectrum. As you mentioned, we think of mental health, we don't always think of housing and food and just, just basic survival, which, my goodness, who wouldn't have mental health challenges, surviving that trauma. Could you talk about some of the things you work with families and young people on, kind of what you see in your days, during your days?
Yeah, there's a wide spectrum of what we're looking at, and so in like on one end, really looking at those basic needs, and so for children who don't have stable housing, have food insecurity, have family instability, or trauma, things like that are really a big upheaval in their lives. So a lot of that is working with some of just like giving them some basic foundational sense of security and hoping to connect them with longer term supports. So on a student level, sometimes that can just be connecting them to a safe adult, someone who they can trust and that they can go to, who's outside the home. It can look like working with the parent on connecting to, local organizations that can help them build up, housing and food, all those foundational supports. And with the school staff, one of the pieces is the psychoeducation piece around understanding that when children are sleeping in cars or in a shelter or in a different place every night, they may or may not have access to clean clothes. So on that like high needs level, that they're not typically able to show up and do math and be able to focus. And so some of those trauma things show up like behaviors because they're just not safe in their own self. So that's on some of those really extreme cases. And sometimes then there's sort of another end of that where there's families with kids who are having anxieties that maybe don't show up in the classroom, but the school staff are aware of that. And it seems to be impacting their connections with other students. It's disrupting some of their learning, perhaps. And so they start asking the questions. They connect with the parents and find out maybe there's more going on at home than they realized and behind the scenes. So then we get to, with those students, maybe it's a little bit more of like meeting one-on-one with a student and giving them tools that they can apply in those, like identify what are their stressors, what are the things that are bringing anxiety. Some of that like therapy light, skill building, maybe things that they've heard a million times of, like, using breathing techniques, which kids often say, they don't like to breathe. They're taught these breathing techniques, but there's an ability to sit down one-on-one and describe why this is important, why this helps your body regulate, and giving them an opportunity to practice it in the school setting, in the setting that's triggering, or perhaps at home, if that's the place where there's things that are upsetting, they get an opportunity to practice that at home. And then working with the parents on that end, it's kind of teaching them those same skills so they can support their child using these. One of my favorite things to do is have the clinical coordinator working with a child, learning a skill, and then get that child to teach their parents how to use that skill. Because then it really instills it in them, it gets their parents on board, and they learn how, it's like basic emotion regulation and ability to then either move on to those next learning steps or learn communication skills for working with their friends.
Are the young people usually kind of on board with exploring this and being part of building bridges? Trish talked about, making sure this is what the parents want. Do the reactions kind of vary there also? Yes,
I would say they vary a lot. I would say the younger kids tend to be on board. They're used to being pulled into one thing or another. They're not used to having agency over themselves, and you're just another person, another adult who's being, taking them to do work on something. And so they tend to be a little bit less resistant to at least meeting with the Building Bridges, clinical coordinator. And then, and then those clinical coordinators try to build, use the therapeutic skills of building relationships, building trust, making it fun, and learning skills. So kind of not just making it like, we're going to dig in and you need to learn this. It's like trying to get them on board, because they're not going to do it if they don't. And then, so some students are resistant because they're not ready to change, or they're going to miss a class where they want to be with their friends, or some other resistance will come up because they don't want to stand out. Like with the older students, sometimes there's that high concern for how they're being perceived.
I was going to ask you about that. Is there a stigma when someone knows, your friends know, well, he's in Building Bridges, she's in Building Bridges?
So I'm thinking about the cases that I've had over the last 5 years that hasn't come up so much for me. But I think it probably has with 10 teams, I think, or 13 teams, that it's come up some. But we try to be conscientious of that, and perhaps like just call them to the office so nobody knows that they're meeting with the Building Bridges staff, and it's up to them to share that. So being really aware of what their particular need is, and trying to address it, and also giving them, especially with the older kids, saying this isn't mandatory, this is voluntary. If you don't want to meet with me, you don't have to. Your parents suggested that might be a good idea. We're trying to work on these things, but again, if they don't have buy-in, there's not going to be success in changing. Right. And if they don't want to meet with us, then we try to work with the families and the school staff to support them. And oftentimes, if there's another school staff that they're connected to already, they might have more luck, so we support them. So a school counselor that already meets with a student, we can help them with specific strategies. I'm thinking of students from this year, like real specific strategies for ADHD of like impulse control. Well, let's like try this very specific thing, or these, handful of things to work on in the classroom, or when you're thinking, this ability to control your body, which can be hard for kids of that age in general, and specifically when they have the way their brain functions is a little bit different.
I have kind of two questions at once that are going through my head. I'll just throw them out there and let you do with it what you'd like. First of all, you've been with Building Bridges before, during, and after the pandemic. Is that correct?
That's correct. Yeah.
Yeah. So we certainly are very aware that young people who are coming back after the pandemic are having a lot of challenges. And young people in general, I get the sense from conversations I have and talking with young people, talking with folks who work with them, young people in general are having it seems to me, kind of a challenging time right now, be it the pandemic, be it the condition of the world today, the lack of civil interaction that people have, social media, et cetera. My kind of two-part question, and maybe I'll ask the second part first, is I am curious. The part I want to get to in a minute is kind of changes, if any, you've seen like pre, during, and post-pandemic. But I'm wondering just, I'm like a lot of people, I have a lot of concern for our young people's well-being right now. And I know you do too. And I'm wondering from your perspective, Nura, and then Trish, if you have anything, also feel free to, have a say also. What's important for the rest of us to know right now about our young people and what's going on with them and what they need? What do we need to know? What do you want people to know?
Well, that is a big question.
Yeah, don't mean to put you on the spot, but because we can start with the pre, during, and post pandemic, and maybe at some point too, if you want to think about it a little. But I think it's important. We all care about our young people, but we adults have a way of getting involved in our lives and the distractions of the day and work, et cetera, et cetera. And I think it's so important that we be conscious of how our actions impact our young people, and that we're aware of what they need from us.
Yeah, so I think I can work my way through this answer,
Okay.
hopefully not make it too wordy. That I think that you pinpointed it. It's what, like, we need to know. That's actually it. We need to know that we don't know as the adults, who've been trained either in mental health or in education or in the school systems, that we often put labels and boxes and criteria on children based on what we're seeing from the outside. And I would say a big theme, especially this year in the work I've been doing, is trying to understand how can we help them express, like, identify and express what they need. They don't know either a lot of the time. And so I think as far as the adults, it's holding a much more open mind of questioning and curiosity, as opposed to expert and feeling like we know what's best for them because we're the adults and we have been there and we've have life experience, but that being more open-minded to ask those questions and say, well, your behavior looks like these 5 other kids, but what's happening for you? What's behind that behavior? What's the driver for that? And I have done a lot of learning this year in particular about how how things show up, and had a lot of epiphanies around going from looking at triggers to looking at sort of that capacity question. So instead of looking at what are the things that trigger kids into these behaviors, it's every time at lunch, or it's when there's a demand on them, or maybe they're in sensory overload, but reframing that and seeing it as there's so much going on behind that we can't see, that it's more like, instead of what is the trigger, it's the question I'm starting to ask is, what's the last straw? And what are all the other things that build up to get them to that last straw place? And so it's a lot more questions for them, and a lot more openness for the adults, and realizing how so many things can look the same. Trauma can look like ADHD, can look like perhaps even just a friend conflict, and can look like puberty, can look like a lot of different things. So asking more questions.
Yeah. Trish, did you have any thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, Nura, well, you put that so beautifully. Thank you. And so grateful that you've been with us such a long time to see the shifts and to have kind of gone through that pandemic together with you and our other staff. Something that our staff have become even more adept at and do such a great job of prioritizing with other cases that's related to what Nura is sharing is focusing on the self-care and the well-being of the adults around the children, because you can't necessarily show up in a way you want to for your children, for your students, if you yourself aren't tuning in and paying attention to your own well-being and your own mental health. And so our service coordinators supporting the parents spend a good amount of time talking with parents about that. What's going on for them? I mean, we're all still recovering from what all of us went through. Same with teachers, definitely. And they are really kind of, in particular, facing the fallout amongst youth of the impact of the pandemic. And so spending time focused on that with parents and with school staff, again, that really does fall into this, what I mentioned earlier about capacity building, because giving them the tools to care for themselves, be self-aware, prioritize their well-being, care for their mental health, those are important skills that our staff are giving to the folks surrounding the students referred to us.
Yeah, I think that's a really important. It reminds me of the metaphor of, when you're taking a flight and the flight attendant says, if the oxygen mask comes down, put it on yourself first so that you can help the person next to you, so you can help the young person. And we have such an impact on young people just by the manner in which we behave and how, how our mental health and physical health is doing, as you're both, referring to. And again, I think sometimes maybe we lose sight of that, and maybe sometimes it might even seem selfish. Well, I need to take care of this, but taking care of yourself is really, really important, because that's how young people learn, and I think about it, I referred to it briefly a moment ago, but I think about it kind of on this macro level in the world I live in, the world of, the political world. And I just think of what, if the young people, tune in and watch this incredibly uncivil debate and violent language and really what so much of our public debate has devolved into. And again, we as adults have to be aware that they're watching and they're learning from us. And it doesn't necessarily instill this sense of well-being or sense of security to see, every adult on the planet, at each other's throat and hurling insults and not working together like we ask our young people to do. So I just think it's really important for all of us to be aware of that. And Nura, I have to say too, I really appreciate your observation regarding how important it is to listen to young people and then just letting them know someone's listening, right? Because we don't always have the answer. And maybe sometimes it's, how can I help you? How can I be a partner in helping you? And instead of, as you say, coming in and saying, well, A, B, and C. One of the things that I know from talking to mental health professionals from outside of the States, I was talking to some folks from Europe, and they said one of the things that's so different, certainly in private practice in the U.S., is you have to diagnose someone with something often to get it paid for or covered by insurance. And these folks were like, our training in Europe is so different because we're just trained to help people. And here you have to diagnose someone with something that may or may not actually be whatever whatever they're calling it, but the insurance company won't cover it unless you do. And then the person has to live with that label the rest of their life. So it's really kind of the whole approach sometimes seems a little challenging to me. And, I don't know how constrained you all are with that within your settings. But, just getting back to being able to listen to people and help them as you do, giving them the tools and just letting them know that someone cares and is going to be there for them.
Absolutely. And I think that that's one of the skills that as a new staff that I drew on the most. And I would say, my learning curve has been huge. And I started working for Building Bridges while I was in graduate school for a counseling degree. And I had a lot of life experience, and a very old undergraduate degree in counseling. But I didn't have as many tools at my fingertips as I do today, but I am able to sit down and listen. And parents, there were a lot of parents that reflected that has been helpful, just to be heard. And I think that's universal. I think when teachers or school staff are given an opportunity to be heard as well, they need it just as much. And that's sort of a post-COVID observation, is the stress level of teachers. We don't often even get an opportunity to sit down with them because they don't have time to sit down and unload, and their capacities are much smaller for the most part because of being short-staffed and asked to do more and asked to do the same job they did before, yet there's a lot of deficits, a lot of losses that happened for the kids. So I think that we all need that to be heard. Yeah. But I think really having the adults know that kids need that, and we as adults need to be heard, not by the kids, but by someone else who cares. And that's our self-care.
Yeah. Trish, did you have something?
Yeah, I just wanted to add, we have the ability to keep our staff's caseloads pretty manageable so that Nura and the other service coordinators can do exactly what she just described, which is to just create space for parents to share. That is a very important part of the work. And it might sound easy, but it takes some real skill to be able to very quickly build rapport with a brand new human who you just met, and set the stage for them to feel safe to share about what's really going on for them and be honest about what they need and their family needs. Because we're just a 90-day program, our staff have to be skilled at that very thing, which is to quickly build rapport and trust so that they can start to get the work done and really get that parent on board. That's just so critical to the success. And I know, Joe, earlier you were asking about what is the reaction of parents served by Building Bridges, and we are able to give parents the opportunity to complete a survey at the end of the 90-day program where they're being asked about all the really important factors and goals of our program, such as do they know who to go to for support? Do they feel heard from their child's school? Do they have a good understanding of what's developmentally appropriate for their child? All those types of things. And we just get such positive feedback from that. And it helps us realize, okay, what we're doing is working. It's hitting a spot. And then if they have critical feedback, we really appreciate that too, because we can take that in and tweak our program so that it's really meeting the needs of the families that we serve. And we do the same thing for school staff. They have a very different survey because we're trying different things at school, but we want them to really feel the impact as well. And their feedback is valuable for sure.
Yeah, I have to say the humility with which you as a program approach this work is very impressive. I mean, you as you mentioned, you're not that you've really had negative feedback. As I've said before, this program has had more positive feedback than anything I've ever been involved with. But you're always open to learning new things and doing even better. And I think that's really a testament to you and the work you do. Nura, I know that, obviously you're a professional and you go to work every day and you do this work, you connect people, you help people, and you're also a human being. And I'm wondering kind of what is this journey like for you, as much as you're comfortable sharing it kind of on a personal level, because this work has got to be both extremely fulfilling and extremely draining at the same time.
Yeah, it really is when I did first get this job, I felt like as someone who had been kind of out of the professional workforce for a lot of my adult life, parenting kids, and doing what I could to make a living, but not in a professional capacity. I felt like it was really a dream job because it met a lot of the criteria that is important to me personally, which is to give help to people who need it, but in a really different way. I was on the fence about going into private practice as an undergrad. Like, do I want to go to grad school and become a therapist? Because it's a very narrow scope of the populations that are able, willing, interested in going to therapy. And so this offers an opportunity for some of those experiences, like to be heard or to learn a few extra skills, and then shown, if you want to do therapy, this is maybe what it looks like, this is how to access it. But it's not pushing it on anyone, and it's free and it's available at whatever level they're ready for. And that wraparound piece was really important to me. So that journey has, it feels fulfilling in that way to me. It meets some of my personal criteria. And I still feel like, because of the way our mental health model is in the United States, like you were saying, with the insurance companies and diagnoses and a lot of that goes along with that. I'm still on the fence about it now that I'm close to licensure and and full-fledged counselor. That I think that both are important, and so getting a different perspective on that, I think that Building Bridges as a program and Trish in particular as the mainstay for most of the whole program. Who, she's had partners kind of come and go, but she's been our rock and promotes our family first, our self-care, and really cares. So it gives me permission to think about that as a professional and not take all my work home with me, not get so stressed that I become burnt out. It takes my own self-awareness as well, but she offers the opportunity to ask myself that question. So I think it's it feels like a really wonderful place to be, to be a supported place to be working.
Thanks, Nura.
That's the sense I get. I'm sorry, Trish, go ahead.
No, I just want to say thank you to Nura. And, I have a philosophy that I try to lead in a trauma-informed manner for our staff because it will trickle down to their clients, and really treating a human who has had trauma or hasn't had trauma with a trauma-informed care approach, it works for everybody. And Nura here for the past 5 years has heard these things come out of my mouth a lot of like, our staff are humans first. So how are you? How are your people? That is number one. And we really prioritize, like she said, family first, taking care of themselves, because we have such a large group, which is getting larger, as I'm sure you'll get to when we talk about the expansion. But it's great because they can cover for each other. Having a teammate means you could step away if you need a break, if you have something going on with your family, you're not feeling well, or you just want to take a day to enjoy life. You have a teammate who you are intimately sharing your cases with, who can step in and cover. So I love that. And then just because we've gotten so large over the years, just imagine all those resources coming together that are coming into this kind of big pot of resources. And so they can utilize everybody's tools. And we are so good at sharing each other's tools and accessing each other's tools. And so it really has improved our work to grow so much over the years.
Yeah, and I do get that sense when I meet with you and your teams that there is people do feel well supported, and there's a very family type vibe when I meet with folks. And not only is that, I think, the right thing to do for your employees and coworkers, but ultimately it's back to the taking care of yourself metaphor. It results in a more effective programming too, and people who have more capacity to help the people they interact with every day. I certainly get the sense, and I'm of the strong opinion that you all are making a big difference in people's lives. Do you go home at the end of the week feeling the same?
I think it depends on the week. Yeah. There's definitely times where we hit, there's also a lot of roadblocks. Yeah. There's people who aren't really ready to accept the help that we can see, like, oh, if I could just give you all these resources. And we don't know why they're not ready for it for whatever reason. Yeah. So that's hard. Yeah. Or, especially the teens there's a pushback sometimes. And so it feels less satisfying. So the other piece that I think is really important for us, and I feel, I've heard this from the beginning, and I also share it out to new staff, is that sometimes when we don't go home feeling really satisfied, oftentimes we're planting seeds. So we're giving them something that we may never see, especially in 90 days, that made an impact somewhere in their mind, whether it's a skill or an affirmation or a resource.
Right. I mean, the cases that come our way have often been created over years, and are some of the school's highest need situations, and they feel like they've really done all they can, and now they want to bring in another resource. And so sometimes we're simply moving the needle, and that is a perspective that we try to remind staff of so much. And like Nura said so well, it's planting seeds, and who knows when that parent may eventually pick up that brochure that was handed to her by Building Bridges or him and make that call. To get that help.
Yeah. And I also think too, when I look at a program like this, what would folks do if it didn't exist? And I think that's a really good measure of how important the program is too. And I know the school districts who we talk to about this, they don't want to go back to the time that you didn't exist. And you're right, and it's hard work. It's a process. It's a lifelong process. And empirically, you're certainly making a difference. We know that the evaluations have been extremely positive. And even, as you mentioned, Trish, another couple of districts are adding teams. Madison's adding another team, some Prairie's adding another team. And so I just think, if you weren't there, districts would be having a much more difficult time. You are a lifeline for so many people. You do make a difference, and sometimes, as you said, you don't see that difference right away. But heck, when you're looking at the life cycle and developmentally of an adolescent, and brain development and everything, and just a family that's in need, boy, just having that 90 days of support. To just be able to breathe and address and get connected with resources to take them to the next step, that can be life-changing. So thank you for what you do. I can speak for the entire community of everyone who's ever come across Building Bridges or interacted with them. You are appreciated greatly, and by the schools, by the parents and the young people. And I appreciate you, in addition to what you do, every day, coming out and taking time with us today to be on the podcast and share with people. Trish and Nura, so the folks that you work with, they get referred through the schools. So if you're a family of a young person and you're interested in building bridges, what would their first step be if they would like to explore maybe being considered for the program? So if you're in Monona Grove, is where you work, Nura, would someone talk to just school administration, or how does that work?
I suggest that people talk to a counselor or social worker, and that's probably the most direct line. But if they don't have a contact, if they know a teacher, they can suggest it, they can mention it. We've had people even call Catholic Charities and say, I ran across this program. Can I get more info? And it kind of goes, so there's a traditional route, but that's really the fastest way is through the counselors and social workers.
Sounds great. Is there anything I missed that either of you wanted to share with folks before we wrap things up today?
I wanted to spend just a little bit of time kind of explaining why we're called Building Bridges, because our staff really are focused on building a lot of connections that weren't present when they opened up the case. So building a stronger relationship between the family and the school team. A lot of the cases that come our way, that relationship may have been damaged or is not very strong. And so they're building that. Nura shared such a good example earlier of sometimes the clinical coordinator is teaching a student a skill, and then Nura can work with the student to have that student teach the parent the skill. So they're building those types of bridges too, just so parents understand what work is happening with their child at school. And then most importantly is connecting families with a lot of resources and really doing a very solid, warm handoff, not just simply handing over a business card or giving someone a phone number, but really probably making the call with them, going to the first appointment to the therapist together, taking them to the food pantry, doing the additional steps needed to make sure a parent actually feels comfortable and really solidly connected before we walk away at the end of the 90-day program. So I wanted to share that. And then just another thank you to you, Executive Parisi, to our 10 school district partners, to Dane County Human Services. Really, I mean, we need everybody to kind of make this happen. And I love the partnership with the schools so much. Our staff are really looped into the schools that they serve, yet they're not district employees. So they get to kind of come in with a different lens and a different hat to all these different scenarios. Great.
Nura, anything before we sign off that I didn't ask you? Or
I think the only other thing, really is, it actually is echoing what Trish said, that I think that the collaboration between all of the invested parties, and I think Trish mentioned them all, from students to, Department of Health Services, it's like everybody, the parents, us, like everybody collaborating with everybody else, down to, the service coordinator and the clinical coordinator collaborating on each case together. That is when the most benefit can happen, is when everybody is engaged and willing to collaborate or figure out how to remove the obstacles for collaboration. And so I really appreciate the opportunity to do that. And I've learned a lot during this program. So
yeah,
thank you so much for having us on.
Yeah, you bet. It's an excellent place to wrap things up. Thanks to both of you again. I appreciate you. I know the community appreciates you, and you're making a difference in young people's and families' lives. And as you mentioned, in a way that we should. The community should come together to be there for our young people, and they are through this program. And I think it's something we can all feel good about. If people want more information, again, reach out to your school, reach out to Catholic Charities. We can certainly get you the information you might need to take the next step. So again, thanks everyone for being with us today on the Dane County Podcast, and we'll see you next month. Take care.